Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we are actually doing an install video on the Tacoma, and I am super excited about this one because we are actually moving to a hard mounted or in-bed solution for the diesel heater specific to Tacomas, and we are utilizing this bracket from Nick. I'm going to go ahead and link his website down below. I'm also going to put up a photo of his Instagram and stuff like that so you guys can find his website, ask him any questions. But these are brackets that he makes specifically for those Tacoma cubbies. Some of us don't have the cubbies, and if you don't have the cubby in your Tacoma, you can still cut and utilize one of these brackets. For my model specifically, I have the cubby, the smaller cubby version, and then also the inverter on the passenger side. And I opted to go with the bracket that still utilizes that inverter, just in case I ever want to use it. I think the inverter in the Tacoma is kind of pointless. I wish I could charge stuff like my battery power bank, such as the EcoFlow, but again, it's useful in some situations, but I still wanted to retain that factory option, that inverter, just in case. So I did go with the option that utilizes that. And then we have the hot air outlet that will route directly into the bed of the Tacoma, which is super awesome. This is going to be super efficient because the overall traveler distance for that piping is extremely short, less than a foot, whereas the other diesel heater build that I did, due to having the GFC at the time, I had to route that air probably about 10 feet, and when you're routing it that much, especially when it's colder, you're going to lose heat as it travels through that pipe. So for that reason as well, since we are now traveling a shorter distance to heat the interior space of the Tacoma, I am still utilizing the Lavaner Pro, but this is their 2 kilowatt version versus the 5 kilowatt version that I used in the past. And these heaters, frankly, to put it, they're awesome, okay? Why I'm going with the Lavaner Pro over something off of Amazon, a cheaper Chinese diesel heater, is due to quality, okay? All of the components inside of this heater are sealed, they're water resistant, waterproof. So since this heater is going to be exposed to the elements a little bit more versus the previous build that was in an Apache case, I want this heater to be sealed, especially the electronics inside of this, from any elements, water, snow, mud, that's possibly going to be flung out into that heater. Nick also provides, or you can also purchase one of these mud flaps, which I have heard prevents a lot of water, mud, and debris getting flung up onto the heater. But again, for an investment, I got this for about $220, and it's free shipping on AliExpress. So you're paying probably about an additional $100 to $75 more over the traditional heater that you can get on Amazon. But this is an extremely high quality heater, and coming from a Chinese factory still, Chinese diesel heater, for me personally, I think it's well worth spending the extra cost to get something that is sealed off from the elements. And then also too, all of the components that come with the Lavaner Pro are higher quality. For example, just even the exhaust pipe is higher quality. So if you are ever doing an install or doing an Apache case with the exhaust coming out, a lot of times you're going to have to upgrade and buy these higher quality parts. So the exhaust is awesome. The fuel line is the upgraded hardline option, so we're not using any of the green stuff here. The other cool thing is they also include some repair or replacement parts, just in case you ever need to take this apart, repair some of the pieces in it. And yeah, everything else is just super high quality. The wiring harness as well has watertight and water sealed connections, which again, it's just those small things is what separates this Lavaner Pro from the other ones out there. Now in terms of the fuel option for this, so since this will be outside, it will be in the cubby of the Tacoma, I'm going to play around with a couple different fuel options right now, and my idea is to have a quick disconnect onto a fuel tank. I'm ordering that, or it has been ordered, it should be here in a couple days. So again, this is going to be probably a multi-day install, just kind of installing the bracket, getting the heater routed up in there, getting the electrical set up as well. But the idea for the fuel tank is to have a quick disconnect on a 3-gallon tank. which should make things pretty easy. And then I'll just basically store that tank inside the bed of the Tacoma when I'm traveling. When I get to camp, I'll take it off, pop up the quick connect, and ideally in that situation, I should be ready to go. Turn on the heater from inside the Super Pacific, and we have the controller here with the remote as well. So I'm going to mount this controller inside the Super Pacific, so it'll be easy to access from the sleeping area and then also inside the bed of the truck as well. So super stoked about this install, and with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into the next part and start with this diesel heater install in the Tacoma bed. Right guys, so we are in the back of the Tacoma here, and as you can see, this is my cubby. The door is off, and I had originally drilled a 3-inch hole in the bottom of this cubby to basically route my diesel heater hose into the bed of the truck. Obviously, we're going to be completely getting rid of this whole cubby piece and replacing that with Nick's bracket. So first thing I'm going to do is remove all of these screws, carefully take this out, undo the inverter as well, and I know behind this it's going to be super dirty, but that's the first process that we're going to do here. All right, so as you're going to see when you take this out, it is extremely dirty back there. Adding Nick's mud flap as well should really help prevent obviously a lot of that dirt being flung up onto the heater itself. But yeah, we're going to disconnect the inverter right here. We'll pop this out, and then we'll unscrew the front side of the inverter as well. All right, so once done, you should have the cover popped out, and then you're going to also have this part. So basically what happens is the cover just kind of pops right on there. Mine was a little bit more difficult to pop out because I had siliconed and sealed the bed of the truck before. Normally it will just pop right out, but I'm going to go ahead and clean this up just because I got some silicone on here. I will re-silicone around this before putting it onto Nick's mount as well, just to ensure we do have another watertight seal. So this is the silicone sealant that I will be using. It is the Dynaflex Ultra Advanced Exterior Sealant. It is black in color, and what I'm going to do is basically just go around all of the outside here, press that in, screw it in, clean up the outsides, and then all we'll have to do is plug in the inverter in the back over there. So I'm going to go ahead and do that real quick, and then I'll show you the final product. All right, so as you can see, the inverter is plugged in. Once this dries, I'm going to go ahead and clean up the sides here, so get some of that silicone off. And then on the back here, you'll see that the silicone has oozed out a little bit. That's perfectly fine. And then I had to just put a little bit more right there as well, because I could still see some daylight coming through. But just adding the silicone should really help with water penetration into the bed, and just one more extra added preventative measure to do in that case. So next thing we're going to do is look to mount the diesel heater on here, and then move on to the following steps after that. All right, so the first thing that we're going to do after sealing the inverter side, again, if you don't have the inverter, you can completely skip that step, is we're going to place the heater on the bracket, going to secure it with the necessary hardware that came with the Lavaner Pro here. And then we're going to measure the amount of ducting that we need, basically coming from the heater to this hot air outlet going into the truck. So I'm going to do that real quick and then show you what the final product looks like that. With the 5 kilowatts versus the 2 kilowatt heater, so again, this is the 2 kilowatt, the ducting and pipe is a lot smaller, so just something to note if you're ordering this and routing this heater into the Tacoma bed. One important thing that I really want to note is keep this cap on the fuel line until you are ready to secure that, just so no grime, no dirt, nothing potentially gets up into that fuel line area and causes a plug, which would be a huge pain in the rear. So make sure to keep that plugged until we do get to that point where we're securing the fuel line on there. So once the heater is all tightened up, I use the 10mm socket to give those a good snug. One thing to note, it is a little bit tight to fit your hand back in here and plug in the inverter, so it might be best to plug in the inverter first, somehow work the diesel heater in there, but I think I'll have enough room to still plug this in and not have to worry about that. So the next thing is we are going to measure from here to here. We're going to measure from here to here, so I was going to fit this pipe on here, stick it through in here, and then just kind of get a rough idea of how much we're going to need to run that. And then I'll use a razor blade, cut it, and we'll move into connecting that to the diesel heater and then routing it inside the cab there. All right, so the next part that we're going to be working on is actually fitting this piece of the heater into here. And how I approach this is you have these 3 pieces that protrude into the circle there, and then you're going to have 3 holes as well on this piece. And this took me a couple tries to get it how I wanted to, but I basically just stuck this on there, moved it around, used a Sharpie to mark the holes, and then also just to see how they were until I was satisfied with the location. So what I'm going to do next is just do a very small pre-drilled hole so I can line it up, and then we're going to use these self-tapping screws that came with the heater as well. So that's going to be the next step, and then once we do that, we'll be able to connect this pipe through here, connect that piece, and we'll be moving into the next steps after that. All right, so we have now connected the heater to the outlets inside here, and as you can see, 3 self-tapping screws, and then if you just take the vent here, that will click in. Hard to do with one hand, but then you'll be able to turn this inside the camper. So if you want to vent it upstairs, sideways, however you want to, that will be able to turn. So yeah, moving on to the next step, we'll dive into that. So we have it secured in. I did this a little bit differently than how Nick put his heater in. So I actually put this whole bracket in first. The pipe was secured to the back of the outlet, and this is probably the harder way to do it, but I left this undone from the heater. I slid the heater up in here, tightened it down, and then I slid the outlet hose back onto the heater and secured that via the clamp. This is the inverter plug, and then this is the power for the diesel heater. So heater is in now, cubby is secured, and we're going to move into the next step of wiring this, and this is going to be really dependent on your type of situation that you want to do. I'm also going to cover these up, so the outlet and the fresh air uptake, just with some tape so nothing gets up in there. But right now, heater is sitting pretty good and right where it should be. These are tightened, just snug fit, and then like I said, we're going to work on getting some power ran, and I'm going to show you how I do it. This is going to be obviously vehicle specific, but yeah, let's move into that part. All right, so we have our wiring harness here, and it looks pretty intimidating right now, but trust me, it's not that bad. So this plug, the bigger one, is the power plug. This one is going to be for our pump, and then this one right here is actually for our controller, okay? Now, I'm gonna make this super clean for my setup, and I am going to trim, cut off all of this extra wire that I won't be needing and soldering it together. I'm going to have to extend my power supply just because I'm going to be running this into the Super Pacific, and then also putting a DC plug on cigarette ports basically to power it off my power bank. So how I'm going to run this is starting really with the power. I'm going to route that and then worry about the pump as well, which is this plug. So this is going to be 2 wires that we're gonna have to snip and trim. Again, I could just leave all of this extra up in there, but for my application, and just keeping it really clean and tidy underneath there, I'm gonna snip off the extra, reconnect the wires, that way it's clean. And then the same thing for this plug actually. In order to route this into the Super Pacific, I'm gonna have to cut this, and I already have a pre-existing hole that I'm gonna run this through, and then we'll go ahead and mount that up in there. So that's what I'm gonna do next. I'm gonna start on that, and then as I go through that process, I'll show you how it's looking and tag along. So for my controller, how I'm going to mount this is actually right up here. So then that way I can route the wire right into the wire or electrical chaseway right here, route it down, and I'm going to come down here, and then there is this removable plate. I'll unscrew that and basically there's a pre-drilled hole that I already have right here. I'm going to run this wire, which I'm going to have to snip this. This is for the controller. That will come out of there, come up here, come in there, and then we'll go all the way up and then through there. So that's how I'm going to route mine. That way too, it is easy to see and adjust from upstairs if needed. It's out of the way, and again, we can hide these wires really nicely with the electrical chaseway. All right, so I cut the power obviously for the remote. I'm going to show you how I routed that in. The next thing that I'm going to do is get my power ran and ready. I am using 12 gauge. This is definitely overkill for the diesel heater, but again, I just want to be safe. I'm also going to be running it a good distance and ways, so I want to make sure that the wire is also thicker to hold that voltage. And this is just some wire off of Amazon, and then also because I am super picky and OCD about how stuff is done, I also have some expandable wire loom that I'm going to put over this. Will also help protect the wire coming from underneath the truck bed, and then as I route it through the chaseway inside the Super Pacific as well. Again, it just looks really good, and I've always done this with wiring now. So I'm going to go ahead and measure what I need, and then I'm going to show you the hole that the wire and the power for the controller is coming through, and I'm going to use one of these grommets. This is just an assorted grommet kit from Harbor Freight. So we go ahead and do that and show you the updated product after that. All right, guys, so we have routed the power cable and the cable for the controller. There is a 3D printed cutout plate here. Thanks to Blake, shout out to him for that. If you have the stock plates here, you can always just trim this out, but have that going into the hole that was drilled prior. I don't have enough room to put a grommet in here, so I'm going to fill this and cover this up with some black silicone and wrap that up. But these are both wire looms, so I'm not too concerned with the metal there. And we also cut off quite a bit of extra of the power cable. I'll probably have to cut off some extra. We've also exposed or uncovered the 3 wires for the controller, and that is this one, so we'll have to trim and cut some extra off of that. Here is that power coming in, so that will connect to the plug for the diesel heater here. And then the next one that we have to do is the pump. So likely what I'm going to do is I'm going to get down underneath the truck here, kind of see where everything is situated at, and then go from there in terms of trimming, cutting up some of this extra wire, and just making sure that everything is tidy and out of the way. Okay, so we have stripped both sides of the controller wires, as you can see here. Oops. I'm going to be connecting them with this solder and seal connectors, so these are awesome if you haven't used these. Try to open this up, give you an example of it, but basically that is solder in the center there, and how it works is when you heat it up, It melts, connects the two wires, and also gives you a waterproof connection. So I'm gonna use these to connect these 3 wires, and then I'm also going to wrap it afterwards and put some heat shrink over it for double protection. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that, and then I'll show you what that looks like after we finish. All right, so we have the controller cable connected. Next thing that I'm going to do is connect the power. So we have the power that's going to be running to the back towards that EcoFlow, or that's actually the All Powers 1500 watt portable power bank. We will be using one of these plugs. So this is a 15 amp rated DC plug, so I'll have to connect that to the very end. But the next thing I'm going to do is connect the power from the heater to the power that will supply the power to the actual heater itself. So same thing like I did with the controller, going to solder those and then put some watertight heat shrink over that as well. All right guys, so that is ran, that is cleaned up. We have the power, the remote control, so going up in there through that hole that I'll have to just throw some silicone on. And then the last bit of this will be working with this plug, which is for the pump. So I still have to place the pump, and then I'm gonna trim and cut this off, and then just like I did with the others, solder it together and shorten it and clean it up so I don't have all this extra wire just floating around in there. All right, so we are inside the Super Pacific now, and it is time to connect the DC plug so we can power it off of this All Powers. This is a 1500 watt hour battery bank, and that's solar coming in. Have a 100 watt panel up on the roof. So yeah, now we're gonna strip the wire on here and basically connect this. And I do have some extra just in case I ever potentially need it. So probably have an extra 2 feet or so, but I'll be able to stuff that back into the wire chase back here to hide that, and then should be looking good. And then all I have to do is pull this out and plug this into the All Powers power station when I'm ready to power it on. All right, so here is the finished product. And if we plug that in, we got power. And we have the heater working, so that's a great sign. Fantastic. All right, so this is how things are looking underneath. As you can see, fuel pump is right here. I did drill one more hole just into this part of the bed so I could mount that. It is at a 45-degree angle. As you can see, it's going right into the diesel heater there. Power for the fuel pump and then the power for the heater is ran and zip tied all up there. The exhaust right now is bolted in, and then I don't have it connected to the muffler, but the plan is to basically get a bigger washer and then a bolt and bolt it through here. This should tuck it up a little bit nicer up in there. And then I will be connecting this part of the diesel or the exhaust to that, and that should be set. And then I have my excess fuel line right now just kind of tucked up, and it is plugged, which is super important. Once I get the other fuel tank in, which should be in the next day or two, I'll do that quick disconnect to that, and then we should be set. So yeah, this is how it's looking right now. I'll clean up this fuel line as well once I know for sure how I'm going to route this. But super excited with how things are looking. And there's a close-up as well. So just got to put that splash guard on. That'll probably be when I do the rest of the quick disconnect for the fuel line. But right now, things are looking really good with the diesel heater. And then as you can see, that is how It's routed into the camper with that hot air outlet. All right, so it has been a while since that last clip that you just saw at the very end. Mainly, the biggest issue that I was running into was this, the fuel tank and the fuel supply. So my original idea was to have the fuel tank outside of the vehicle, and that is still the idea. And we finally found a solution for that. But I was having some difficulties with the quick disconnects that I'd purchased. So originally with this setup, especially with this tank, there is an actual uptake that utilizes quick disconnects. That was my original plan, was to utilize that, have the quick disconnect on the uptake. Sounds very simple. Unfortunately, it did not work. I am not sure if there is a check valve inside of this. I called the company, they said no. I'm not sure if there was a check valve or something not connecting correctly with this quick disconnect, but ultimately it did not work, okay? So we went to a different alternative or a different route, and that led me into actually using the Uptake from the Lavaner Pro kit that they actually include with their tanks. Drilled a hole, screwed that into here, and tried a couple different solutions. The second attempt of utilizing these quick disconnects still did not work as a proper fuel supply. I got frustrated and eventually gave up for about a week and a half of trying to utilize the quick disconnect, and just basically dropped the fuel line from the diesel heater into the actual fuel tank. I decided to give it one more shot though, and that was a couple days ago, and voila, we had success. The diesel heater actually ran for about a solid 3 to 4 hours, issue-free, utilizing this current setup. So let's go ahead and dive into that, and I'll show you an up close on what I did. Okay, so like I had mentioned, this is the original uptake valve that is included with this tank. That was my original plan, was to use this. Did not work for me, and it could be because the actual pump is trying to suck this up, so in a vertical. Most of the people that I have seen use these types of quick disconnects with their diesel heaters are utilizing it where the tank is essentially level or in line with the heater. It's not the case with this build. So as you can see here, this is the uptake that comes with most diesel heater kits. And I essentially tapped into this tank again, just drilled a very small hole and then actually screwed this in. You will have to cut and trim the piece to fit with this tank. And then what we utilize is the black fitting or the black pipe that also comes with the diesel heater here. And then we still use the barb 1/4 inch to 5/16 or 3/16 here with the coupler as well. All of these parts will be linked down below. And I did that just in order to downsize and make sure that this fits into this thicker portion here, because with these quick disconnects, it is a 1/4 inch size, all right? So the idea behind this is getting into camp. We will basically unclip this. This is just a cap to prevent dirt and grime from getting in there. And then this will actually be connecting into the piece that I have below the truck, which will be for the fuel uptake. One more thing that I did add to this tank is this pressure relief valve. So when I do get to camp, I can just unscrew this. That way pressure is not building up when the pump is actually sucking fuel up through this uptake and causes extreme pressure on the tank. So that was added, super easy to add, and highly recommend adding that. So getting to camp, this is what essentially setup would look like. We have the quick disconnect here, and all we have to do is actually just connect these two. Like so. Hear the click, unscrew our pressure valve, and now ideally we are set up for the diesel heater to run. So the actual fuel line run is very short. I did leave enough just so I can kind of move this tank around a little bit if needed. But with the initial fuel supply setup for the diesel heater, that is all that needs to be done now, is connecting that quick disconnect from this fuel tank to the fuel line that is uptaking that fuel. Now, while in theory, this tank should not leak anymore, I am using one of these Husky, I believe these are the 27 gallon from Home Depot. It's what I was using actually for my Starlink transportation as well, which I have since changed. But this is just a tote that I can actually close and toss in the back, and it actually keeps the diesel smell. And if there was to be a leak with this tank, or if something happens where it starts to leak, it starts to spew out, it's not going to be spewing all over the back of the truck here, but rather inside this bin. And then also acts as a storage just for the Milwaukee chainsaw, because sometimes the oil likes to leak out of that. We have just a shovel, and then I've also actually stored some gloves, so if I have to clean up a leak, or also just when pumping it at the fuel station, don't have to worry about that. So definitely recommend going this route, and it actually works really well, fits in there extremely well. And then you can also store some other stuff in there as well if you wanted to. So that is my idea with the transportation of that, and then also just to ensure that no diesel is leaking out when traveling down bumpy roads or whatever it may be. So last thing I just want to cover in this video is I've used the heater now for a total of 3 nights. And I'm just going to say it's a game changer from using the all-in-one Apache case, especially with the Super Pacific. So with that pass-through space, it makes sense to basically heat the downstairs and the upstairs. In the camper like the GFC, it really didn't make a whole ton of sense to basically heat the downstairs and the upstairs, because you're essentially blocking off the downstairs when sleeping at night. But with the pass-through space of the Super Pacific, it is extremely nice to not only heat the downstairs, but also the upstairs as well. When you get up in the morning, downstairs is extremely warm, which is a very, very nice surprise, and I'm extremely grateful to have that heat not only downstairs but also upstairs as well. With that being said though, there are a couple things that I am going to work on improving, and one of those things is actually routing the heat upstairs a little bit better at night, and I do have a plan for that. Okay, so this is a 2 kilowatt diesel heater. Maybe going with a 5 kilowatt heater would have been better, but one of the pros, or the immediate pros that I saw with the 2 kilowatt, is that this thing barely sucks fuel compared to the 5 kilowatt. Okay, the fuel consumption difference between these two heaters is night and day difference. The heat output is slightly less with the 2 kilowatt versus the 5 kilowatt. So if you're worried about the overall heat of the interior space of the camper, maybe going with a 5 kilowatt Lavaner Pro would be a better choice. For me though, it is enough heat. I just need to find a solution to route that heat upstairs a little bit better. And I do have a plan of actually getting a 3D printed mount for that swivel, where the fins, you can direct that heat up and down. I essentially plan on 3D printing something, or getting a friend to 3D print an attachment piece, so I can still attach a hose and have it routed upstairs during the night or during the evening, and in the morning just essentially taking that off so it's heating downstairs as well. The heat difference, to kind of give you a rough idea of what I saw on the 3 nights of using this, downstairs is anywhere between 70 and 75 degrees, and then upstairs is anywhere between 55 and 65 degrees. As you get closer to that wedge, the heat overall is going to drop. So you're going to notice the coldest spots down near your feet, just because naturally you're only heating downstairs. That heat is going to rise, so is going to go through the pass-through on the Super Pacific. But if you want a more direct heat source, especially down near your feet, that is where you're going to have to actually have a hose still on here and route that through, and then kind of direct it down there. Okay. So again, it does make a huge difference. It warms the camper a significant amount, but it's not going to give you the same effect of if you are dumping that heat directly into the upstairs like I was before. I could heat the upstairs probably to 75 to 80 degrees if I really wanted to, depending on how cold it was outside. But having the heater all in one, it's one less thing that I actually have to carry in the back of the bed. It's one less thing that I have to worry about setting up. Literally getting to camp, parking, attaching the fuel line, connecting my power supply, and turning the heater on is all I have to worry about now. So in this type of camper, so with Super Pacific, if you're doing an AT overland, essentially any camper where you have that pass-through space, I think this is the ideal route of hard mounting a heater in the back of the bed. And with Nick's mount that he has here, there is no drilling. So if I ever want to reverse this, all I have to do is pop out his mount, pop in the cubby, and I'm all set. So there's no drilling holes or anything else in the actual bed of the truck, which would be a huge pain in the rear to eventually fix down the road if you decide to go a different route. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this longer video going over this diesel heater install. I know it was kind of a little bit all over the place, but this was a learning experience for myself, and I am hoping that you can see potentially some of the errors that I made along the way, the struggles that I had with the fuel supply as well, and hopefully can apply those to your future build of using Nick's mount, or even just installing a diesel heater in the back of your truck bed. So if you guys have any questions, any concerns, any comments on this setup, drop them down below. Remember to leave a like and also subscribe for future content.